Because I'm here. You guys, I know. Guess if we talk about stuff. I tell you, I'm saying like. As long as you're okay. I'll That's right. You and I are. This is the rest of our. Oh, yeah, go ahead, man. I appreciate that.
Let me just, do we need to do a roll call?
Are we going to be voting on it?
We are.
All right, so yeah, we probably should go ahead and do a roll call.
Okay. Jessica, can you do a roll call for me, please?
Who's supposed to be on this?
I believe, well, last time we did just the, to start live streaming. Last meeting, we didn't do a roll call for this
We did not?
particular meeting, but for the main council, but.
Okay, then we don't have to do one. We did. Okay, then let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so thank you all so much for being here for our Needs Assessment Committee meeting. Our next item that we have on our agenda is to approve the agenda for this meeting. Now, before we get started, we're almost at 1 o'clock. We have a full agenda today, and we have a full council meeting in a little over an hour. So, and looking at this agenda, I don't think we're going to get, I'm almost positive, we're not going to get to every single thing. So I just want to let the committee know that for the agenda, I am definitely planning to make sure that we get through section 5, A, B, and C. And depending on our time, I'm going to try to get to D. But I don't think we're going to make it beyond D. I'm just being 100% honest with all of you. So I just want you all to keep that in mind as we look through the agenda. We're going to try to get through as much as we want, but I'm just being honest. I think that's as far as we're possibly going to get. Before we approve the agenda, one thing that I will ask the committee to do, I'm asking for us to amend the agenda to move the section on the next meeting dates. I want to pull that conversation up under the needs assessment intent to negotiate discussion. If we can pull that up there, then I know we can definitely get to that content before we might have to conclude the meeting early. So that's the one amendment that I would like to make to the agenda. Okay.
I am slightly worried that I have a different agenda than you.
All right, do you? Okay. So we have here on the agenda to approve the agenda, and then I have down here the next meeting dates, which is under number 5.
Yep.
I want to pull that up under 4 because we're not going to get to everything under number 4. Okay, I just think we're going to run out of time. So I want to be able to move that up to discuss it before we complete everything that's listed under number 4.
All right, fair enough.
Does that make sense? Okay. Did anybody second? All right, then I think we can approve that. Sounds good. All right. All right, so wonderful. So we will amend the agenda as recommended. Okay, let's move on and let's look at the minutes from the July 8th meeting. I hope everybody had an opportunity to review those. Do we have any edits to the minutes from the July 8th meeting? So moved. Do we have?
Second.
Okay, well, the minutes from the July 8th has been approved. Thank you very much. All right, and now is an opportunity for public comment. Jessica, do we have any individuals?
Yes, Dr. Glenn, our first speaker is Mr. Neil Steen.
When y'all get tired of me, let me know, because I want to know, when y'all quit listening, I want to know before I stop talking. I'll just be very quick because I know it's a short agenda. I think I read the draft of this. I think it's really well done. I would just encourage you to think about what I'll call strategic needs or fundamental practice needs as something that you measure. To what extent is our system now trauma informed and trauma responsive? To what extent are we gender and culturally responsive in our practice? Things that would be fundamental to the delivery of services, assuming that you sort of share some of the vision that I have about that, but sort of think about the list of priorities is still a little functional and siloed to some extent, and the need for an overall coordination of care and these fundamentals like recognition of ACEs and recognition of trauma and gender and culture are important, I think, and might be helpful additions. Thank you. To give your responders guidance in what you're trying to measure and achieve. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comments?
Yes, the next speaker is Mr. Rick Lockenbach.
Hi. I've been remiss in not thanking you for your service on the council, but thank you for your service on the council and your commitment to doing right by our children. I've also reviewed the ITN. I think that it's a good work product. I have a few suggestions of possible improvements. We know that housing stability is a critical issue for children, and it's noted as one of the priority areas. Let me suggest to you that you add to your definitions a definition for homelessness, which is mentioned in one of the priority areas under housing stability. And I'll refer you to a state statute that addresses homelessness. It's fee exemption status for exempting post-secondary fees, and it's in 1009.25 parens 1F, and it says, and it's referring to a student, since it's a post-secondary statute, a student who lacks a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence, or whose primary nighttime residence is a public or private shelter designed to provide temporary residence, a public or private transitional living program, or a public or private place not designed for or ordinarily used as a regular sleeping accommodation for human beings. So it's an expansive definition, and I think it's critical that when we look at housing stability and homelessness, that we have a broad enough definition to cover as much of the waterfront as possible. I agree with Walter Sachs' suggestion that there's some language that could be reduced. There's a huge expectations with this ITN. So consider using a scalpel to look at things like Walter's suggestion. The language on page 12, scope of work, first paragraph, recommendations should include the parameters for when a program or services should no longer be funded. I concur with what Walter said about that. There's also language on page 14C3 relating to scope of work, and the heading is informative programs inventory. It says quantify how the respondent will identify programs and services in Florida and around the county that have documented effectiveness in addressing issues identified in other sections of the ITN. There's a huge amount of work that needs to be done within the needs assessment. Let me suggest to you that when you start getting into all the different programs and strategies that are out there and research base for those, it would be nice to have that. I just suggest to you that within the scope of what you're trying to achieve, that's a bit ambitious. The only other point I'd like to make is I didn't see in the ITM any kind of provision that relates to how critical the timeliness aspect is of completing work. I think that those that are responding should be aware of whatever you think is relevant relating to parameters for getting the work done on time, such things as penalty if it's not done, if the work's not done on time, or if there's some ability to extend beyond the contracted period of time, to note that. I understand that would be more fully fleshed out later, but I think that those that are considering submitting proposals need to be mindful of that in their submission. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Do we have any other public comments?
Mr. Jack Levine.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I have to confess, I'm speaking under the influence of a meeting I had this morning that was gathered by a whole child, Leon, on the subject of equity. And while everything is fresh in my mind, we had about 120 folks gathered this morning. I couldn't stay for the entire agenda in deference to this meeting, but there were some very key points made that I wanted to share in the context, of course, of your agenda, which is, first of all, while the document that I have reviewed has a lot of head involved, I'm looking for more heart. And the stories that are told in between the lines of really what is the impact of poverty, especially generational poverty, what is the impact of violence, especially as has been said, the traumatic violence that some families face. There needs to be, whether it be in preface or in some kind of tone that I'd be glad to help with. This is about real children, real families. We have a certain degree of emotion that I think needs to be instilled in the prospective bidders for this work that needs to be somehow measured. And I know this is not easy. And again, I'm fresh from this meeting, which we were saturated in people's stories. And 2/3 of the attendees were law enforcement at today's meeting. I meant to mention that. And law enforcement is under transition itself, of course, on how it's viewed by various communities and how it's viewed by legal scholars as well as policymakers. So I want to make sure that my message to you this morning in these couple of minutes is, let's add the ingredient of the real life impact that our work is going to have on the children and families and the entire community of Leon County, and find a way to find the language that reflects our commitment to that. And again, the definition of equity is not equality. It's equity realizing that we can bring some people to a level in which they can compete, whether it be educationally or economically, if they do have access to multiple levels of service. So I'll be much more specific and much more helpful, I hope, in the future, but I just want to make sure that your bidders get a chance to add that emotion to this process.
Thank you very much.
Last speaker, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Jessica. I appreciate it. Okay, thank you to all of you for your comments. Those were very well accepted, so thank you very much. Let's move on to agenda number 5, the needs assessment, intent to negotiate discussion. So before we get started, I do want to talk a little bit about our timeline and where we are in moving this forward. I know at the last meeting that we had, our decision was that we would make edits to the ITN today, and then we would be prepared to convene again on the 19th and then present the final product to the full council to review at that time. Given the sensitivity of this and the amount of work that needs to go into it, I think we heard a lot of the passion from the participants that were here. I do believe that we need to maybe slow down and delay this a little bit to make sure that we have this ITN right. There is a lot that's weighing on this, and if we don't get it right, then we mess everything out. I really think this is the foundation of what we need to do. So Ted, I'm going to ask you if you could just share with the committee some of the things that we wanted to consider to be able to delay our vision in moving this forward so that we have a little bit more time to get it and what that new proposed timeline would be.
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. In discussing this matter with the chair last week and looking at the volume, the complexity and thickness of the ITN, hearing the comments that we've heard, and needing to do due diligence, we agreed that it would be prudent of the council to delay, for the council to delay consideration of the final proposed ITN until the August 19th meeting. The reason for that is basically twofold. The council needs to thoroughly vet this and understand it, and the public needs to thoroughly vet it and understand it. And without fulfilling those requirements of the council, the council will not be fulfilling its due diligence. If you look on page 36 of the packet, you'll see the timeline for this. And this is just the timeline of activities that need to be undertaken to get the ITN out and the needs assessment done on page 36. One of the other things that Dr. Glenn suggested is that if the council tries to approve this thing today, the end line, as you can see on the last page of the meeting packet, would basically be a month earlier. September 1 is when the things can be awarded. that's a month before the end of the fiscal year. And I guess there are, we had questions about, is the council really going to be in a position to want to make a 1 month or a 13-month? We don't know that yet, but the time, it didn't appear, since it would only be 30 days earlier, to potentially impact the council in determining how to proceed in awarding community grants. And that's pretty much what we.
So thank you very much for reviewing that, and welcome, Darrell. Thanks for joining us. So what we are proposing for our delay in this to be is that we will still work today to hash through some of the many changes that I think a lot of us would like to see to be a part of this ITN. Then what we would do is after we make our recommendations today, we'll have an opportunity for Ted and his team to go back and make some of those recommendations. I propose that we then convene again on August the 5th as a committee. And we already have that time blocked off on our calendars because that's when our next committee meeting, our council meeting is scheduled for. It's my understanding, Judge, that you're going to cancel that meeting for the full council for August 5th today. Is that correct?
I thought that was, yeah, I thought that was thought was that we did not need.
It's canceled. Okay.
Which would open it up.
What? Correct. Okay, so if that meeting's been canceled, that means that our schedule should be available to convene on that day. And that gives us an opportunity to come back as a full group, look at the changes that were made as a result of our discussion today, have one more opportunity to make sure everybody's comfortable with it. All of your recommendations are taken under consideration. And then with that, we should then be prepared to make a recommendation to the full committee by August 19th. Now, one caveat I'm going to throw out there. Depending on where we are by August 5th, because this is a lot of work and there's a lot of emotion and a lot of what everybody wants to do, I may ask the committee to say, after August 5th, if we're not ready to, put something solid in front of the committee, I may ask for one more convening before we meet again on the 19th. And I don't think we need to make that decision today. I think we need to make that decision where we are on August the 5th, if y'all are comfortable with that. So on August the 5th, we will see where we are, see what our level of comfort is. And then I may ask, so please keep your calendars open if at all possible, for us to have one more convening prior to convening on the 19th, just to make sure when we present this to the full council, we're comfortable and we're all ready to put forward an ITN that we're all proud of. Is everybody comfortable with that? Yes, sir. Okay. Yes. Yes.
I'm comfortable with that. I think that's a great method moving forward. And if there are any changes to that method, I'd expect that we would be communicated with. If there are any changes in our work moving forward, that we be communicated those changes.
Absolutely. I completely understand. And that would be our intent, Darrell, to ensure that we're able to communicate that to all board members in advance.
Right. Now, I do have one question. It may have been answered regarding our method moving forward. The input of outside subject matter experts to this, at what point are we allowed or permitted to do that?
So I'll take a stab at that, and then I'll let you clean that up. Okay, so it is my understanding that once we have made some changes today and we get those edits from Ted and Holly, we have the ability, because it's public, we have the ability to get recommendations from other members. What I plan to say as a part of the update on the council meeting today, I will also let the council members know this is our current version. We will be sending everybody the updated version based on our discussion today, and I will ask them to formally seek outside support from others within the community. So moving from the changes that we make today, once we get that version and we share that with the board, and we also share that with everybody, we will ask everybody to seek guidance from outside people to review that and provide their feedback.
Now, that's not what we discussed at our last meeting. We talked about a tailored input, most specifically for subject matter experts from those that we solicited from this committee. I'm not suggesting that we make this a free-for-all, because then I think we move beyond our scope. When we, as members of this committee, like for example, the person I used was the Dean of the College of Ed at Florida A&M University, with instruction would be able to make the types of suggested changes or references that might make this a far more that we would capture all of the expertise found in our community is the way I described it. I don't know that that would be something that for the persons outside of our committee to do, because then I think you can easily run afoul and create a whole lot of additional staff work, which is not our intention.
Okay. So I talked to Ted about this briefly, and Ted, I know that there were two options that we came up with as possibilities to get that formal feedback. Would you please review?
Yes, ma'am, and you're right on in terms of the public.
Sure.
As soon as we get the edits made from today's conversation, we will be providing them to the full council member, all the council members, and posting it on the website on Monday. In terms of the specialized input that you requested, there's two ways to go. I think we discussed about this last week. And the meeting on the 5th, since there are 3 hours, may be a perfect opportunity to do this, is for council members to invite individuals to testify and provide their input on the document that will be on the web, so that the council and committee can consider that. The only other way to get input from the professionals that need to look at this and we need their input from is either informally and individually, or to formally incorporate them either into the committee or to form an advisory committee, in which case they are subject to sunshine and can't talk with any of the council members or other folks.
Right, but we said that would come from members of this committee, not the full council.
I'm sorry?
The recommended subject matter experts who would inform the final ITN would
Yes.
be persons that would be recommended to provide that type of testimony or expertise, would be persons that were suggested by members of this committee, not the full council, right?
Oh, okay. I wasn't clear on that. And if that's the committee's direction, then suggestion to the council.
Please, yes.
So, today's July 22nd.
Your Honor, I'm sorry. Can you turn your microphone on?
Today's July 22nd, August 5th. Is the idea for these people to come and talk to us at our August 5th committee
On
meeting?
August 5th. And there would be persons that we would select from the persons who are gathered at this table now, not the full council, because this is ultimately going to go to them. I'm not trying to make it laborious for you.
Yeah.
I just thought that some of beyond our subject matter expertise as appointees, I think that what we want in this ITN is to be demonstrative of the harnessing, creating a document that will ultimately inform what the statement of work or the specifics of the work guaranteed required of this vendor that will be chosen.
So I'm not opposed to using this council to identify those individuals that speak to us on August the 5th. And I think that would be absolutely appropriate. I would still like for the full council to be able to review it, seek feedback from other members of the committee, of the community, and then they provide that feedback to us and comments that they may want to share with us, but without a formal presentation to the council or to this committee on August the 5th. Does that meet your?
That's fine. I just think about the staff. If all 10 of us are providing edits rather than the committee that is charged with it, I just think that becomes rather laborious. That's all. But I'm down for whatever makes the dream work.
As a starting point of this, moving forward from this point, can we talk about the origin of this ITN? I assume this is not a raw document that Ted created on his own. I assume that this is coming from other people's experience.
Okay. So before we get to that, I think that's a valid question. What I want to make sure we do is that we agree to postpone this, because as of right now, we are supposed to deliver this to the full council.
So moved.
Okay.
I will second that.
Okay, awesome. Does anybody disagree with that? Okay, so thank you very much. That is approved. So what we have decided to do is that we will wait until the August 19th meeting to send the final ITN and bring that to the council for full approval on August 19th. Okay, thank you very much. Now, let's briefly address Daryl's situation. So Daryl, what's your opinion? I mean, I would like, because I think for the August 5th event, I do think that we are able to make recommendations today, and maybe that's something we could add before the end of this call, that we can find out who we want from this council to be able to bring to the August 5th meeting to give them an opportunity to provide feedback to us. I think we're we're okay with that, and I will make a motion that we, do I make a motion or does somebody else make a motion to do
So I
that?
think we can, I'll make the motion that anybody who wants to bring somebody to us, any one of the committee members who wants to bring somebody to us to talk to us on August 5th may do so, recognizing that we got the time that we got.
Second.
And,
Okay.
yeah, it's fine.
So we have a motion for that. Do we have a second?
I second.
You second it? Okay, all right. So does anybody disagree with that? Okay, we're good. All right, thank you very much. All right, Mr. O'Brien, you had a question about the origin of the ITN.
Yes.
All right, let's take a moment to address that.
Start there.
Okay, yes, ma'am. Holly McPhail, who I'm going to be mentioning at the board meeting, and she has been a main part in putting this together, a full partner in putting this together. We both scoured the internet for different ITNs that we might use. I found one, and this is the basis for this, is primarily a water management ITN, Water Management Board ITN, in terms of the boilerplate. All of the scope of work, which is really the key part, all of the definitions, the minimum qualifications, the overview, the back, basically all of section 1 and 2, we drafted ourselves. And much of the content of all of the rest of it, we modified, edited it, or replaced. We basically used it as I guess, an outline, if you will, and used some of the language that they used on the technical sides that appeared to be to work.
Warren, do you have any response to that?
Mhm.
You're comfortable with that?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much. Okay, so what I would like for us to do right now is to review the priorities that we discussed yesterday. I'm sorry, the last time we convened, that these were going to be the priority areas that we will ask for the bidders on this ITN to make sure that they adopt these as priorities as a part of their response. So Ted, I'm going to ask you to please review those priorities.
We've got slides to show.
Okay.
So
Oh, please.
okay, so at the last needs assessment committee, the committee agreed on a set of priorities that will be and can you hear me?
Yes.
At the last committee meeting, the committee agreed on a set of priorities that would act as basically the guideline for the entire ITN, and which will ultimately be the priority areas into which the council the needs assessment will be based, and the council will invest into the community. The council agreed that the first priority area should be success in school and life, school readiness, school age supports. These were identical to the priorities that were suggested by the CSC Planning Committee. The committee also agreed on healthy children and families. In this slide and in the next slides, what is yellow is new wording that we added to these, or that the committee added to these, and I added to this, so you'll see what the changes are. The word youth was added because of the committee's desire to address child welfare, foster care, and children transitioning out of the child welfare system. Other than that, physical health and mental health remained the same from the recommendations from the planning committee. Stable and nurturing families and communities. This is the third big priority area that was made by the planning committee. From your discussion last week, We added expand career pathways to youth development. That also helps to address children transitioning out of the child welfare system. Well, again, we've added the word youth because traditionally the difference in services and supports for children and for youth are different as they are in the public school system. And then we've added two new, completely new priority areas, housing stability and supporting caregivers. Housing stability, you can see reduced number of children and youth at risk of or experiencing homelessness, including those transitioning out of the child welfare system, and supporting caregivers, reducing the consequences of food insecurity you know what, that is not the right one. Madam Chair, can you read that, the third one?
I will read it.
And I apologize for that. I don't know.
Let me find it. Hold on. It's on page. I wrote it. Hold on.
Balls.
So it says, under providing food stability, reduce the consequences of food insecurity by ensuring that children in Leon County have adequate year-round access to healthy foods.
Yes, and so that's the housing stability. Under supporting caregivers, it will read enhance caregiver, including kinship, foster, and adoptive parents, capability to respond to the emotional and behavioral needs of neglected and abused children and youth. Would you like me to read that again? I don't know, it's a lot of words, but.
Yeah, go ahead and read it again, Terry.
It's on page 16.
I see it. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Walter.
Thank you very much. All right, so this is the result. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think you did a great job of capturing our discussion from our last meeting
I agree.
and the additions that were made.
Thank
I
you.
think it's spot on.
So I just wanted to, I asked him, Ted, I'm sorry, to please make sure he reviewed it one more time. I thought it was important for us to see those additions made since our last meeting. And what I am asking is, are we ready and prepared to make a vote? That these will be the priority areas that we will take to the council and say, these are the priority areas that we will focus this ITN on. Do we have an approval for that?
Move that we accept the recommendation made by the chair.
Thank you very much.
Second.
Yes.
Point of discussion, not specific on these purposes, but tied to this though, going back to page 12, it identifies basically evaluation of children or youth by age groups.
Yes.
And in there's a group that's 18 to 24. Is there a reason why we include that?
Yes. Ms. Liza, would you like to address that? I think that was something you brought forward in the last meeting.
The 18 to 24 was to provide things like working with kids that are aging out of foster.
That's the age limit for jurisdiction under.
Okay. All right. I just didn't know why.
Sure.
It typically is not when you think of CSC, you don't think of 18 to 24.
So to me, may I respond?
Please.
So for me, working in the dependency system, we had independent living dockets for kids who were never going to be reunified with a parent, never going to be adopted. Even though those children, for some legal purposes, become adults at age 18, they continue to have rights under the state statute, and I'm sure under the federal law, to supports by the Child Welfare Agency. So that's why it appealed to me. Liza, I don't know if that was your idea or not.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely. Plus, I think that our generation of those younger ones. Yeah. Oh, sorry. As both a child and a mother are critical.
Okay. Just a point of question. I'm done with my comments.
Okay, awesome. All right, sounds
on
good.
this- On the motion.
Thank you. All right, so let's go back to our motion. So we have a motion on the table to move these priority areas forward as the priority areas for this particular ITN. Is there anybody that opposes that?
I don't, but I just have a tiny little wordsmithing little thing. Under 3D, I wonder if we should say, so supporting caregivers, supporting and expanding, because that always seems to be an issue of not having enough of those caregivers.
Supporting and expanding. Okay. So Ms. McFadden is suggesting that under 3D, we include supporting and expanding caregivers. Is there any opposition to that?
I guess my suggestion would be if we're going to add that, it should be expanding the number of, we don't want the caregivers to get bigger.
However you want to wordsmith, that's fine. I'm just thinking, I know in Miami, they're doing a big, through their Children's Services Council, adoptive parents campaign. And it would, if you said expanding or some other word for, it would capture ideas like that.
All right, thank you very much.
We'll work.
All right, is there any opposition to including expanding the number of caregivers as a part of 3D?
Or maybe supporting and recruiting, something like that. Is it?
Yeah, I would leave the wordsmithing to whomever. If that's fine. As long as the concept's there, we're good.
I think we're all speaking the same thing.
Okay, then thank you very much for that edit. And I am happy to say that we will adopt these priority areas with the caveat that that one will be changed a little bit and Ted and his team will bring that back to us for review. But these are the primary areas that we will move forward with. So thank you. Okay. Now, I do want to talk a little bit, and we have a little bit more time, about the next set of dates for our meeting. And we did talk about this a little bit. We will convene on August the 5th. We will convene from 2 to 5. We do have a 3-hour block of time for that meeting. And I do hope that we're able to conclude everything by that time. As I mentioned earlier, I will definitely make sure that we make a decision at the end of that meeting if we feel as if this committee needs to convene again prior to convening to the August 19th date so that we're ready and prepared to give the full council the opportunity to see the final ITN. So what I want to do is to go into the ITN review. And I do know that we have a lot of questions that individuals have brought forward. So we're going to take some time and go through some of those. We will try to get through most of these. I will be watching the clock. And when we need to break to go to the meeting, then we can make a decision as to how much of this we are going to finish today and what we need to pull over into the next conversation. So we had a lot of questions from our council members. I have quite a few, but I'm going to start with the ones that are listed here. And I'm starting with Walter, who's in a conversation. So Walter, I understand.
Where are the questions?
Pardon me?
Where are the questions?
So he's going to bring them forward. I just have a list of individuals that have questions, and then he will indicate what those questions are, and then we will discuss them. So Walter, I'm going to start with you.
Actually, the questions, Walter's questions and other questions are from individual. Walter's questions are on in the needs assessment meeting packet on page 35.
Awesome.
Page 35.
Page 35. Thank you. I didn't realize that. Page 35. Oh, great. Thank you. All right, Walter, let's start with your questions.
Thank you. And Ted invited me to come today just to clarify if anybody had any questions about my questions. So I'd be happy to address any concerns or any clarification that's needed. Item 1 specifically referred to a paragraph at the beginning that included a requirement for the selected vendor to provide recommendations, including parameters when a program or service should no longer be funded. It's also repeated later in paragraph 1CI. My comment is that I felt that that requirement was out of scope for a consultant performing a needs assessment, and that as a board, we will at some point develop not only procurement procedures, but probably monitoring and oversight procedures that our staff will adhere to. And in that environment, we would be establishing the parameters around when programs should be monitored, should be measured, should be evaluated, what flexibility we as a board would give them to continue. There's a lot of grant-funded models out there that best efforts are applauded. And even though you might shut down the program, you don't penalize it because it failed. It was an effort. In other cases, you would fund a program and you'd have a penalty process if the provider fails. You'd actually withhold funds, take back funds, whatever. So all of those styles, doing procurement and doing contracting, I think are sort of outside of the scope of what we want this consultant to do. And I thought this additional requirement moved the scope too far. We were creating a boundary that's hard to meet for a consultant, one, probably not at all skilled in setting that kind of arrangement up. So I thought that was like a bridge too far.
Yeah, and could I speak?
Please, yeah.
So, you know, you got to remember what we're doing, which is part of what we're doing is complying with the statute. The scope is assess the needs of children. And this does not really assess the needs of children. And this is best practices, pretty part of the best practices for contracting. But the document will get real lengthy if we try and fix every policy.
And I think a concern could be that a vendor who's recommending a certain needs assessment or an assessment of the needs in our community, if they had to caveat that with language around when you should not be concerned about that need anymore, or when that need might go away, that could be influenced a great deal on how they deliver that product to us. And we don't want any influence over that. So I think if you remove that requirement, you reduce that potential conflict issue as well.
Did you have a comment?
An example of that, I hate to be verbose, but I know we're public, so I'll make sure I'm clear. If your needs assessment identified a program that didn't need much, and then you also ask them when we should shut it down, and they come back and said, well, you only need 6 months of this. Well, that's not really there. We're not asking for that opinion, but that could be read into then someone saying, well, the needs assessment guy said we only need 6 months, so that's all we're going to do. And then, well, your consultant said this, why don't you listen to your consultant? Well, let's not ask them that, because it puts us in an unfair position as a board, and it puts our eventual executive director in an unfair position when he's recruiting staff and designing operating procedures.
Did you have a comment, Judge?
No, I appreciate
Yeah.
Walter always.
Any
Well,
other comments or discussion?
I guess, but does that then preempt them from providing us what might be prerequisites in terms of our approach and our work? I think of the allegory that Mark used at our earlier meeting when he talked about the comparison of, what was it, 10 things that move us a mile compared to 1,000 things
move an inch, 3 things that move a mile.
And that's, so I'm wondering, does this, your concern, preempt them for providing us what is prerequisites, whereby we may start far afield of where we might need to make our first steps, is my only concern.
Yeah, I think that might be more of a concern of my fourth comment, which is around a funding strategy, as
Okay,
opposed to this, which was specifically asking on recommendations of when we should no longer fund a program.
okay.
The funding strategy could end in a non-funding decision, but I think my concerns about the funding strategy do have some relationship to that, but
Okay.
this was specifically about that, when to shut programs down request.
Yeah, I'm assuming that any comprehensive assessment of needs of our children is going to include services, demands, programs are going to far exceed the $9.3 million. It's our job to figure out how to prioritize among those and where are we going to get that. But to that point, Walter, I do think that a part of this should be identifying as programs are brought forward, as needs are brought forward, what are those things that need to be measured to help us determine if those needs are being addressed. And if we identify measures, if projects, programs, engagements are, if we move forward with those and those metrics aren't being moved, that would be a time for us then to decide to step back from those relationships, those programs, and identify something else. So I think just as much as timeframes and dollars, I think we need to make sure that they also put in what they determine are the key measures of improvement within those categories.
So what I'm hearing, and I completely agree with you. So instead of asking specifically for parameters around time, but we want some parameters around what certain measures are benchmarks that should be achieved. And then if we aren't able to achieve those certain things, then we may consider no longer funding certain projects instead of setting a time frame.
Yeah, my feeling, and I think you can read that from my comments on 3 and 4 as well, is that we're really getting outside of the scope of a needs assessment at that point.
Yeah.
A needs assessment simply delivers you the facts and evidence of the gap. If you start then asking that same vendor to tell us when is that gap going to be closed, or which priority should we look at first, it's really a different ask.
Now, I agree with you there because that's not their job.
It's not their job.
But
That's
if
our,
we-
it's like we're pushing our responsibility, because then we could always point to that and say, well, they said,
Yeah.
but that's not us.
Yeah.
And I would like to reserve that, just one person's opinion.
But I
I
think-
think we ought to solicit separately from that, having the needs assessment in our hands and having the clear facts and evidence. I think one of our speakers mentioned, what's the return on investment? That's a huge piece of our funding decision.
So I would say with that, just if we have identify needs, but also those measures of success, those measures that we should be monitoring to determine whether we're.
What moves the
And
needle?
then
And then
that,
we
well, then,
determine.
What's
and
the
then we
indicator?
determine
Determine
the time,
it.
because the
Okay, that
timeframe
makes
really is
sense.
tied to,
Right.
are we moving the.
What would be the indicator that would
Yeah.
say that an improvement has occurred? What would be the
Exactly. Okay.
evidence that we should be looking
I
for?
agree with that.
What does the canary in the tunnel look like? That's okay to ask for, but a funding strategy or a timeline, they don't even know how we're going to fund the project. How would they ever come up with a timeline?
Well, I guess for me, what would happen, there is the response that we get in terms of the needs assessment, but then I guess it would be tasked to the new executive director and their staff to come up with the work plan that will have been informed by the needs assessment.
Right.
And that'll be where we put those types of descriptions in. And
100%.
And then that one, and I think and I'm not a part of that committee, but part of one of the major responsibilities of that executive director will be the formulation of the work plan that comes from what will be the needs assessment moving forward. And that might be something that that committee may want to consider as a part of its job description, or in terms of responsibilities tasked to the new executive, to the final executive director.
So if I don't hear any opposition, Ted, I'm just hoping that this is something you and Holly would be able to do. So to remove the specific parameters around when the program should no longer be funded, but just have them identify what are the measures that we should be monitoring to indicate success in this particular area. And then it would be up to us to determine when we stop funding on a program if we don't see progress on those measures.
You know, as I'm thinking about this, I don't know that anywhere in the ITN we reference the amount of money we think we'll have over a 1 to 3 year period. And if I were in their shoes and didn't know what that was, I think you could boil the ocean. And I'm not sure that that's, you know, I think we maybe need to be a little bit more specific about the amount of money we have, because it helps them to tailor their response.
Would it be enough to put in there what the millage rate is that's been voted on so far and what the maximum millage rate is, something like that?
Be zero to $9.3 million.
Yeah.
I would put the actual estimated numbers, because making people go
Right.
back and try to figure out millage rates, it's.
Oh, sure. Yeah, yes,
But
yeah.
is that for their consideration? Does that inform their?
Yeah, my comment on that is that is public already.
It is public, but
We've made that information well-known. And if I'm asking a consultant to provide a needs assessment for this community, I want to know what the needs are. I don't need his opinion on whether I can fund it or whether we have the ability to fund it. I need to know what the gap is.
Right, we're not
And if it's
asking.
if it is a huge gap and we don't have the capacity to close it 100%,
determine that.
that's reality.
Yeah.
But having them know that, I I don't know that that affects how they present us the needs and how they present us the indicators that would tell us those needs have been met. Certainly, it would give them an advantage to maybe stylizing their response, but then that also is now leaning toward, here's your funding model, and here's how you should do it. And I think that's what we need to be deciding on, not something coming from a consultant. And the reason I bring that up is because I worry that that then could cause conflict. People could say to that consultant, you don't need just a little bit of this, you need a lot of it. And then that get read into the report. And then we now have influence based on how much funding we have on how much of something is needed. I don't know if I'm being clear.
You are.
So I'm given the time, I will ask Ted and Holly to work on the language around that and bring it back to our August 5th meeting so we could determine if this is something that we're comfortable with. Okay, all right, perfect, thank you. Walter, I'm going to try to get through all of your comments today since.
I think we're done.
Are you done completely?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
that's all, it was comprehensive.
Okay.
It was all around the same concepts of going outside
Beyond.
of scope creep a little bit.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much.
And I appreciate the committee's work and wanting to take on more, but
Sure. Okay, well, thank you very much. We appreciate you being here and being a part of this discussion. Mr. Jones, I'm going to turn it over to you. I understand that you have some questions that you would like to address with regards to the ITN. You don't? Okay, all right, well, sounds good. All right, no worries. Ms. McFadden.
Yes, where is the collective impact language?
Collective impact in the, well, the page numbers for it's on page, do you all have your council packet?
Yes.
Yes.
It's on pages 10 and 11 of the council packet.
Okay,
You all have the committee packet.
I have both.
I have the council packet.
The council ITN.
So what are we looking for?
I can give you the page numbers from it.
What?
That's the council ITN, because the council ITN has page numbers at the bottom.
Okay, all right, I got it. So 10,
I'm sorry,
11.
we had three different, we had a needs assessment, a council, and an ITN. We had two different page numbers that we're dealing with.
Tyranny of multiple drafts.
So if you've got a page,
Is it section 2, starting scope of work?
well, section A5, that helps.
Okay.
Identify opportunities and make recommendations.
Conditions, okay.
Okay, so my comment is exactly the same as Walter's. I felt like this was going outside the scope. It says identify opportunities and make recommendations to improve the existing system of care in Leon County. That, again, to me seems outside the scope of a needs assessment. Because you're trying to, say overall to improve an existing system of care. And I was thinking recommend it with specific recommendations on return on investment. We can use Mark's terminology of measurements or outcomes or what have you, just to kind of make sure we're all using the same terminology throughout. But I was concerned about asking a group to come in, and it feels to me outside of our scope to ask them to make recommendations to improve the entire existing system of care. That seems outside of needs assessment.
Well, but your replacement language, does that not also run afoul of what?
Well, that's what I'm
discussed
saying, that
earlier?
replacement language, you could probably just strike the whole thing. Because now Mark's already talked about adding in the language that I was trying to get to, which was some type of measurement language.
But measurements are different than recommendations on how to invest funds. And y'all excuse me for standing up. My lower.
No, I
back is
understand.
No worries, no
No.
worries.
But that's the only reason, I mean, based upon the conversation we just had, and then the subsequent recommendations seem to still go into that whole funding model, which we,
Yeah, I'm striking, I'm just saying strike the whole thing.
okay.
Don't
And no-
worry about
and no
the
replacement-
replacement
no
language,
replacement
but
either? Okay.
I just don't think we should be getting into a recommendation on the entire system of care.
So I do have a question for you with regards to that. So how do we ensure that if we have children or youth that are part of this program that have multiple issues? And how do we ensure that that we are creating a system that will address all of those needs effectively, instead of, waste in one system and waste in another, but creating a system that addresses the well-being of that child. Does that make sense? I mean, to me, how are we?
To be
ensuring that?
perfectly candid, with $8 million or $7 million, I don't know that we're going to be able to take on changing the entire system. So what I'm trying to think through is what is it we want out of this needs assessment? And if that's very specific to, let's find out what the needs are, find out what the potential best investments can be, then that becomes, I think, our role later on. I'm trying to, I think the same thing Walter was doing, try to separate those two issues.
Dr. Lund?
Yeah.
So maybe, presumably the priorities will come from the data, and it'll be a judgment for us. We're going to have, well, I think we all anticipate we're going to have needs greatly exceeding the resources that the tax will generate. It's going to come down to us. We're going to have to make the call, and it's going to be on the priorities that we set, really on the procurements that we put on the street. And that's is how we'll have to express those priorities. And I don't know that the needs, it's like I said last time, at the end of the day, it's going to come down to our judgment. I'm not certain that we're going to get this level of here's the magic bullet. I don't think there's a magic bullet out there. I think I'm saying the exact same thing you're saying, Liza, at least I'm trying to.
So I'm hearing a recommendation to strike this entire section under 5A. I'm sorry, A5. Is anybody opposed to that? Ted?
Liza or Ms. McFadden and I have talked at length about this. I guess, and I fully understand the issues that have been discussed with regard to what's appropriate in a needs assessment and what's more properly in the domain of the council and its decision-making authority. The reason that this is in here, and maybe it should say systems, although maybe systems should be taken out, is because I don't believe there's anywhere else in the ITN, and again, this may just be in the domain of the council, where after looking at the needs, looking at the gaps, looking at the services that are available, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, if the vendor sees opportunities for programs to work more efficiently and effectively together, that's what this is supposed to drive at.
Why don't we just say that? Opportunities for programs to work more or improve efficiencies of children's services.
That was my point.
And I think that point is well made. I mean, from the needs assessment will come findings and recommendations. And I think that gives them the liberality to make certain recommendations based upon what they've done. And then let's not also forget, in terms of the statement of qualifications that we require this vendor to have, we were one of the recommendations that they've worked with other CSCs. And so their expertise, I think, is invaluable. It's not just a recapitulation of numbers and data and statistics. We're also counting on them to bring a certain level of expertise by virtue of our selection of them. And that comes in no different than any other audit or review recommendations and findings.
Okay, so I think we're in agreement then.
So a point of clarification, where are we? Or where's the committee? I'm sorry.
So it's my understanding that we will replace this language to be able to say, we want to ensure that there are, I don't.
If the gap is, if the gap is in the way services work together, identify that gap.
So that there are efficiencies across the services. You can find a way to say that eloquently.
And I guess, and Ted knows this, I'm very opposed to the language of collective impact because it is a very nonprofit word, which doesn't take into consideration government and other ways of working to help parents and children. So I want to be very inclusive in that process.
I think we can exclude the term if you're more comfortable with that.
If I could make a quick comment too, the beauty of the ITN is that in this process, you're determining the vendor who has the best value, right? One of the most experienced, most competency, the most whatever. When you shortlist and you arrive at that and the committee agrees and the Children's Council Services puts stamp of approval on it, you move over into negotiations. In negotiations, you bring forward ideas like, if you see silos, you see programs that are abnormally siloed that should be looking to work together, please elevate that to our attention. You could write contract language that gets to that without having that to be the purpose of the ITN or say, that's how I'm going to determine best value. So you can reserve that idea. These comments about innovative ideas and collaboration and coordination and service integration, those are great language ideas for a contract.
Right. It feels like
You
we're
don't
writing
have to be in the
contract, but we're-
ITN. Yeah. That's the beauty of the ITN is this is just to identify the best value.
Voice of
Then-
experience.
Then you drop into contract negotiations and get crazy with your
Everything.
really great concepts. The TED brain comes out.
What page were you reading?
Okay, given the time, because it's almost 2:00, I also have a list of questions that I do not think we're going to have time to get to. So Ted, what I'm suggesting I do is that I write these out and I will share them with you. Can you share them with the group? Is that allowed?
Oh, yes.
Okay, then I will do that. And then I would ask that based on the conversation we have today, you all work to make those changes, share those with us, and then we will review them prior to discussion again on August the 5th.
We would hope to have the changes made and on the website and in your hands by Monday, Tuesday at the latest.
Perfect.
Is Mr. Rowe going to be here for the main meeting? Did you say?
Yes, sir.
Because let's just make sure that if that process comports with Sunshine, maybe that your questions need to be publicly posted. So
Okay, then I could do that.
it's just not the individuals.
Okay. So given where we are right now, I am going to, let me make sure there's nothing else that we need to address immediately. Okay, so given where we are, we still have quite a few agenda items. We need to talk about the evaluation process. A lot of discussions about that. Those things will be discussed during our August event. But I will ask that once those edits come through, everybody please take a good look at those and be ready for the discussion on August 5th.
When will we expect those edits?
Tuesday at the latest, hopefully Monday.
Tuesday.
If there's any change in that, you'll let us know.
In writing.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Liza.
Dr. Glenn, did we ever get an answer? I'm going to be in DC on the 5th, but I might be able to join if it's via Zoom. Did we ever get an answer on committee meetings if that was
I
allowed?
thought we did.
The answer was only if you're really sick.
Okay.
But we can, we can ask again. It might,
You're gonna be really sick in DC.
We're not.
it might be that if we're able to do a Zoom call that's broadly available to the public, that is possible. We'll ask them again.
Okay.
What's my request? Okay, with that, I am going to adjourn this meeting and then we will reconvene on the 5th. Thank you.
Outstanding. Well done.
weird.
Vice Board Chairman.
At the last meeting.
Good.
Yeah, the first meeting.
Good
Got it.
job. Excellent leadership, in my opinion.
Weird, seemingly old fashioned
This whole.
It's not-
rationale.
You're on.
Who do we push back on? I mean,
Well, the
I get it for
legislature,
the
right?
whole council,
Attorney General.
but for the committee meetings, that's what I was trying to say. I thought the committee meetings might be a little bit more,
The state guru, Pat Gleason. Do you know Pat?
I know the name, yeah.
She has been around for a
Yeah.
long time and she's been the guru for decades. She's going to present on the Sunshine on August 19th.
Okay.
So
So
let's ask her.
let's ask again. Sometimes I find with lawyers, it just depends how you ask the questions.
And you know what? You pissed me off.
What was
I've
that?
spent all this time justifying this. And they addressed it in 5 minutes. But I'm glad they've addressed her. Are you happy?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. We're moving on.
There was a little, so I'm not, there were places that have been hired to work. So the goal is usually.
Do you know if there's coffee anywhere in this building or a coffee
Email me and
before
say-
2 o'clock?
All I know is down by the back,
I would say,
there's a cafeteria actually somewhere. The judgment.
yeah.
Yeah, oh, everything's a little.
Very good. Okay. Thanks.
Good day, sir. How are you?
Good, how you doing?
Doing good.
Gerald, how are you?
Huh? It's a cafe.
Thank you for being here today. That way our background people and they can all see us. Hey, Neil. Thank you. You go to. Yeah. It is a big. Oh, yeah, yeah. But yes. Well, thank you. Yeah, well, sorry about that. I think we just. Thank you, ma'am. Well, I know, it was kind of.
Carmen, so I could sit. I just didn't know should I be over there, but it looks like.
No, no.
Okay, so I'll jump at the end.
I will. That's cool, dude. I'll give you a call. Get to it. Okay.
Yeah. No.
This.
Thank you. Just a reminder to turn your microphones on when you're speaking. This is being live streamed. Okay. Mr. Mark O'Brien.
Here.
Mr. Paul Mitchell. Ms. Liza McFadden. DCF Regional Manager Walter Socks. Honorable Jonathan Scherstrom. Superintendent Rocky Hanna. Dr. Sandra Glenn. Commissioner Carolyn Cummings. And School Board Member Darrell Jones.
Here.
And Ms. Carmen Connor.
I move approval of urgent. Acceptance of our minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is this on? Are you good? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, as you know, at the last meeting, made a recommendation to retain the services of Mr. Rowe as our general. Today, I'd like to present to you the gentleman and the firm that I've selected to act as CPA and provide accounting services for the Children's Services Council in process that I'm to identify Mr. Grayson contacted six CPA firms and CPAs across the county. The highest bid was $335 for the part 20 for manager. Mr. Grayson's bid came in substantially lower with an offer of doing business for us exactly Grayson owns, John Grayson owns Grayson Accounting, PA, a licensed audit firm providing accounting, auditing, attestation, tax, and consulting services to individuals, small businesses, government agencies, and nonprofit organizations. Mr. Grayson is a certified public accountant, certified fraud examiner, and certified inspector general through the Association of Inspector Generals. He has acted before owning his business as inspector general for the Service Commission and inspector general for the Florida. If it is the pleasure of the council to ask if Mr. Grayson could go to the podium and introduce himself and answer.
One. Well, I can probably speak loud enough. Chairman Sorsham, council members, it's my honor to be here with you today before you. I'm completely honored to be able to, the possibility of providing accounting services. I have with me today Natalie Chappell, who works with me, able to answer any questions you may have, but just wanted to come before you, let you put a face with the name.
But maybe you can hear me. Mr. Chairman and members of the council, I appreciate Mr. Grayson coming before us today. And I believe the information that has been provided by our executive director and the information in our packet demonstrates that Mr. Grayson has an impeccable background, education, and experience certified as far as the Inspector General office is concerned for audits and examination, and based also on the representation as far as his billing rate. I think that's clearly competitive based on his experience. So having said that, Mr. Chair, I move that we accept Grayson Accounting Consulting PA as the accounting firm for the purpose.
For a number of jurisdictions, right? Area, they're also been involved as NWSD director, managing our annual city audit as well. So they bring both experience. Extremely important.
Thank you. Very good. And I'll bring some entertainment as well. Thank you.
No, Mr. Chair, we don't have any comment cards turned in at the moment. The issue that's live stream, so if you can't hear.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in terms of what has been going on the last month, I think all of you know we've been working very hard on the IT, draft ITN. committee had its meeting. Chair Glenn is going to be reporting. We've also secured an employee identification number for the council, a PO box for a physical address. I have retained the contract program specialist administrator who many of, well, all of you heard from by email, and several of you know, Holly McPhail. Her information is in the board meeting packet on pages 13 through 16. Ms. McPhail has extensive experience in the communications arena, program evaluation arena, and training arena. She has been a full part in helping to create the ITN that we're working on, also in creating the CEO search materials that you all will be on today, and we'll be putting on the table for your consideration communications plan at the August 19th meeting. And to let you know that I have retained her services. We have completed the CEO search materials. We've been working with the General Counsel on a draft procurement policy, which you will hear about today. Will be on the agenda for the August 19th meeting. We've toured meeting facilities, and thank you for Mr. Mitchell for some of his suggestions on facilities. All future meetings of the council will be at TCC campus in the student union, where they have a big ballroom that will accommodate space for all council members and participants. TCC is waiving the fee for that room for us. And I guess there's one meeting in October that will need to be here. Committee meetings will be here unless they are back to back with the council. TCC also filed statutorily required reports with the financial report, and the budget will be securing insurance for the council, D&O and general liability insurance this month. Bring that back to you 19th.
For you, draft procurement policy. Many in the local government world are somewhat surprised to learn that it's not a requirement of state law, either under the Constitution or actually have. However, our state attorney general and public policy, having a procurement policy is absolutely proper administration. The purchasing regulations, something that we put together, modeled after a sister children's service. We looked at that very, very closely. Services of my health partner, Springer, who's recognized leader in procurement throughout the state, and asked Fred to help tailor children's services. He went through very closely and made some refinements that were appropriate discounts. And for you is relatively straightforward procurement policy. Council would procure services going forward, commodities necessary. The part of most procurement policies is competitive proposals, where you would basically seek competitive proposals for the service if those services are expected to exceed a certain dollar threshold. That threshold included draft changed set at $35,000. If you are procuring a service, expected cost of that service on an annual basis is less than that. And it generally is down to that $35,000 discretion of the council can afford to be raised, but it happens to exactly coincide with state procurement. So state appreciate the council probably at this time to do it certainly not closely or but I would suggest so inclined is to take under advisement, communicate any input the council may have on the procedure as it's laid out here to the interim itself. Work to finalize a formal approval at the council. Formal approval will probably take place through initiative or resolution basically approving those regulations as the procurement policy. And as with any council, any policy can be changed over time. If you find that it doesn't work, it should something else will make relatively
Thank you so much, Mr. Rowe. Mr. Mitchell.
Yeah, I have a couple of quick questions. I appreciate your input, Mr. Rowe. You mentioned that we reached out to Hillsborough County, a good model. Two quick questions. One, when was the last time the Hillsborough County procurement process was updated? You know? Okay. And yeah, and was their dollar threshold also $35,000? So, and while I appreciate the fact that it's, we didn't have much time to think about this, and we can provide input. I also think it's, I just want to make this one point about that $35,000 mark. The $35,000 mark I'm very familiar with in state procurement, but those are with agencies that have significantly higher budgets than what we have. I would say that every one of our dollars is incredibly precious, and I would just ask that we consider, and I haven't thought of what a magic number is, but that we reduce that number, that we actually competitively procure more, not less. And I base that on really the percentage of our total budget, $35,000 is. That's my only thought.
You have a recommendation on an amount?
I don't. I'm sort of just I didn't have much time to think about it. Maybe 25,000. For example, while legal services are not required in state procurement to be competitively bid, we'll take services like the accounting services. If we wanted to procure those in the future, I think it's a good idea to invite all Leon County, all interested, we'll just say CPA for argument's sake, anyone who would be interested to bid on it. Again, it's not our money, it's Leon County's money, it's the property owner's money, and I just want to make sure that we're sensitive. So maybe 25,000, and that would probably include, that would catch the CPA firm and a law firm.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mitchell. Ms. McFadden.
As an add-on to that, if we look at the CFR 200 guidelines, which are the federal guidelines for procurement, their simple threshold, which is their lowest level, just requires you to look at 3, different entities and, make sure that you've done that process, which if we put that as our lowest level marker, and basically took that language, you would know that even that was happening at that very lowest level of whatever we then set the next benchmark as.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Jones, go ahead.
I'm also interested in us looking at companion language as found in our local jurisdictions. I can appreciate our having looked at what they do in Hillsborough County, but for example, here in our own community with already 3 jurisdictions who have procurement policies that express the values in terms of the emphasis that we place on local procurement policy to include, and I'm willing to discuss this further offline with Mr. Granger, But I'm interested in us also providing language that strongly encourages, particularly when there is opportunity for oversight, for decisions to be made through securing quotes that would make that determination, that we'd also give strongly consider local minority and women-owned and small business firms found in our local community. We do not have the benefit of a disparity study to set those types of goals. But again, if this document provides guidance to our staff, then I think that those things that are a priority here in our procurement policies in our local jurisdictions can certainly inform the procurement policy and the values as expressed in the CSC.
Very good. Mr. Granger.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I've been texted that there are people who are listening to the stream who cannot hear. So if everyone would please speak loudly into the mic when you're talking so that folks can hear.
Am I not speaking loudly enough?
I'm sorry?
You can't hear me? Oh, okay. I never hear that complaint. I got to do better.
No, sir, I can, but I'm not sure what the streaming issues might be.
All right then, thank you.
If I might also, the meeting packet was posted a week ago, and this material was submitted for posting last night, so the public would have access to it.
So, Mr. Granger, maybe Mr. Rowe, this is going to bring us to a question that my continuing efforts to make certain that we're complying with open meetings. Would it be appropriate for some of these comments, and Paul, maybe that you've had a chance to think about it, propose a number, Ms. McFadden, maybe if you have a chance to propose that, the outlines of that specific process and some language, could those comments be submitted to Mr. Granger in writing and then submitted to you at least incorporated for discussion on our meeting on the 19th, something like that?
Yes, sir.
The only thing I would recommend is that when that transmittal happens, it's directly to Mr. Granger and not a broadcast email where everybody else on the board sees it.
Yes, we are slowly learning not to reply all. Yes, thank you. Mr. Jones. All right, excellent, excellent, excellent. So that, I think, is the end of our report on the procurement policy. And so we will add it. It will certainly be on the agenda. Mr. Rowe, is that the idea that we'll vote on the procurement policy on the 19th?
Yes, sir.
All right, excellent. So we'll plan to vote on the procurement policy on the 19th, assuming we have consensus and we can get to agreement. That brings us to committee reports. Dr. Glenn, you are recognized for a report of the Needs Assessment Committee. Oh, wait a minute. What did I miss? I did skip Robert's Rule of Order. Dr. Glenn, may I back up? And so we had a parliamentarian, which is Commissioner Cummings. And Commissioner Cummings, I was hoping you would give us a brief idea about parliamentary procedure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you all hear me? My mic.
Do you want to come take the chair? Come take the chair so the people that's streaming can hear you. Is that okay?
That's fine.
While we're doing that, you just come sit and you can talk. That's fine.
The mic is on. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Robert's Rules of Order that's in your packet, I just put together a synopsis of what I felt were some important just procedural issues that we should all be aware of. Just a reminder, most of us are members of boards and nonprofits, and other entities where we're familiar with the rules, but we recognize also that this body operates in the sunshine. So just wanted to remind you, and also recognizing too that we now have a general counsel. When Chair Surstrom appointed me as a parliamentarian, we did not have a general counsel. So I think right now properly any legal issues or parliamentarian issues would be addressed to our general counsel, and it would be our chair search room who would enforce those particular provisions. But just briefly, what I've given you is just a one-pager. And as you know, we have adopted our bylaws, and the bylaws specifically indicate that we would be governed by Robert's Rules of Order. And so I set for 4 Roman numerals that I felt was just significant to make sure this body operates in a fair, as I said, efficient, democratic, and orderly manner. First of all, we recognize our chairperson. He's presiding over our meetings. In his absence, the vice chair will preside. We recognize him and honor him as Mr. Chair, Mr. Chairman, and of course, the same honor is due the vice chair, Madam Vice Chair. Obtaining the floor. To maintain order, we should not be speaking out of order. None of us should speak unless we are recognized by the chair. He acknowledges us by designating by name, and then we proceed with discussing the relevant pending matter. General rules of debate, and we all know this, must come before this body generally as a motion. Once it is moved, and second, then the proper procedure is to discuss the issue on the floor. Generally, on the Robert's Rules of Order, the individual that makes the motion generally has priority to speak to that motion first. Okay, so the maker of the motion has preference. Any comments about that motion should be addressed to the chair, not to the individual that actually made the motion. And I think sometimes we get off track and do that. But the comments should be made to the chair. We really should not have any cross debate between members of this board. Debate ends, as we know, with a majority vote. The chairman calls the question. If it's a unanimous, we don't really have to take a formal vote if it's clearly unanimous. And then finally, debate limits. Robert's Rules of Order, the newest edition, indicates that debate by any particular individual is generally limited to 10 minutes, unless the body has adopted some specific time limits. And I gave an example for the Leon County Commission. Because of COVID and the restrictions that was recommended by the CDC that you not be in one particular room more than 2 or 3 hours. With the Leon County Commission, we adopted a 3-minute limit for the commissioners to speak in the interest of our own health, safety, and welfare. And so I just use that as an example for this body if we wanted to set a limit on members speaking. We don't tend to have that issue with this body, I don't think. The exception, of course, is if one individual of the body is presenting a report from a committee, then we expect that presentation to, that person to have unlimited floor time. I believe that's just general information for all of us so that since we are in the sunshine, we can have fair, orderly, efficient meetings, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner
That's my
Cummings.
comments. If anybody has any questions. I'd be glad to
Commissioner
answer
Cummings?
any questions.
Commissioner Cummings,
Yes, sir.
would you be willing to make this same presentation at the Leon County School Board?
If asked to do so, yes, sir.
You know, what's funny is I thought it, but I didn't say it. I'll let him say it.
Thank you.
Outstanding. All right, so if there's no further discussion of the report, Commissioner Cummings, thank you so much for that informative report. Dr. Glenn, you are recognized for the report of the committee whenever you're ready.
Mr. Chair, I'm learning that that's the way I should be addressing you. Mr. Chair, and to the rest of the committee members, I am pleased to report about the activities of the Needs Assessment Committee. This committee has been working extremely hard to finalize the ITN, to make sure that this ITN is appropriate. And we realize that there is a lot that needs to go into this, and it is really a foundational document that will define the work of this particular committee. So with that being said, our original intent was to have the ITN complete and to be able to share with the council by August the 5th. But given the amount of work that we realize needs to go into that, we have made the decision to delay asking the council to vote on the ITN until August the 19th. And that's the next time that this group will convene. So we will at that time bring forward that ITN for final vote. However, you all will have an opportunity to see it. We're having multiple iterations. There is currently a draft of the current ITN as a part of your packages on page 19. If you've not yet had the pleasure of reading that, I ask all of you to please sit down and read through it carefully. We are definitely looking for your feedback. We are making edits to that in the moment. We've made some edits at our committee meeting that we had today. So by Monday or Tuesday of next week, Ted and Holly will get the updated version to you all. So ask that you all please read that and be willing to share your comments and feedback. But we will bring forward the final version of that by August the 19th. Now, in preparation of the ITN, our committee has identified some priority areas. These will be the priority areas that we will be asking the bidders to provide information on. And it took us a while to finalize those priorities, but we have come to a conclusion. And I've asked Mr. Granger to review those priority areas with you all and provide a brief overview as to how we came to those priorities.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At the second to last meeting of the committee, they analyzed or reviewed all of the data that had been used to create the whole child report, the information that the county had to create its needs assessment, the United Way and the United Way report on Alice. When looking at all of, and the needs assessment planning committee information. After reviewing all of that information, the committee determined that it would be appropriate and in the best interest of the council and the community to basically adopt the recommendations of the CSC Planning Committee with a few changes. Those, we'll run through those right now. The first priority remains unchanged, and there's three big buckets of priorities. The first is success in school and life, which includes school readiness and school age supports. By the way, these are in your packet at the end of the section 2 of the ITN. The second big bucket is healthy children, youth, and families. Youth has been added to specifically denote that the council will be exploring opportunities to invest in children who are transitioning out of the child welfare system and in adoption and in care of those children. Physical health and mental health are the two items under healthy children, youth, and families. The third big bucket is stable and nurturing families and communities. Again, the yellow shows the differences or the changes that were made by the committee to the planning committee recommendations. Stable and nurturing families and communities is the first area under, or is the third bucket. Youth development and providing food stability are two keys there. Again, youth was added, expanding career pathways again, while focused on all children and youth was added, particularly with regard to children who are transitioning out of the child welfare system. Two additional buckets were added, if you will. Housing stability and recognition that all of the data that the other groups had used showed that there is a significant gap in housing stability and needs to address housing stability in the area, and reducing the number of children and youth at risk of or experiencing homelessness, including those transitioning out of the child welfare system. This last, supporting caregivers, is wrong on this slide. I will read it to you again. It is at the end of section 2 of the ITN. And again, it relates to the foster care system, and it reads supporting caregivers. And the committee agreed to change that title to address either recruiting or expanding the number of caregivers. Enhance caregiver, including kinship, foster, and adoptive parents, capability to respond to the emotional and behavioral needs of neglected and abused children and youth. Those are the priorities, Madam Chair.
Thank you so very much. And you can find those inside your package on the package page 32. And it's also on page 14 of the actual ITN. So you can have an opportunity to review those there. But as Ted mentioned, we did look at the overlap of priorities of those multiple documents, the other needs assessments. We looked at what the planning committee recommended, and then where we saw there were gaps of things that were not, areas that were not covered, we added those additional areas to our final list of priorities. So with the work that has been done to identify these priorities, I am hoping that the council would consider adopting these as the official priority areas as we move forward for the ITN. So is there a motion to adopt these?
I'll second.
There is a motion and a second discussion. Mr. Mitchell.
Mr. Chair, if I could just ask Dr. Glenn a quick question. I think I understand what we're doing here, and I believe I support it, and that is we are adopting the priorities, nothing else. We're just adopting the priorities that those that came before us spent a lot of time creating, and that's all we're doing.
That's all we're doing.
Plus the few changes that Mr. Granger highlighted.
Correct. So we're adopting the priorities that were identified by the planning committee. And then we also compared that to a lot of other documents, like the whole child report, what is it? All of the other assessments. United Way, right. So we looked at all of those, and we looked at where the overlaps were. And we said, these were areas that all of these different reports realized these were areas of need. But then there were a few that weren't in the report, the recommendations from the committee. So we said, we think those are important enough, and those were housing and expanding the services of caregivers. So we also added those as those are the priority areas that we want the bidders for the ITN to spend time identifying what are the current level of services and what the needs are in this community. Perfect. Does that make sense?
It does, and I understood it, and yes, I feel very good.
Thank you. Thanks for clarifying.
Also, if I may add, Madam Chair.
Yes.
One of the things that was also important that our chair made certain of is that we did not, although we fine-tuned it, we still maintained the same 3 principles that guided the ballot decision, the ballot referendum that went before the public in those 3 areas of critical concern. And so we've kept those, and what we've done is just made it better.
Absolutely.
Such that the will of the voters is still maintained.
Mr. Hanna, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tell me again what page, or can we just go through them briefly one more time?
Yeah.
Ted, why don't you put them back up on the slide, Ted?
What page is it on?
They are in the council package at the top. It says page 32 at the top.
Yes.
But if you look at the bottom,
For some reason, I don't
it's
have
page 14 of the ITN.
Yeah, I'm missing that page.
You're missing it?
Yeah, that's all right. If we just go.
Okay. Ted, will you please review it?
Sure. Would it be helpful for me to read these, or would you like just specific?
No, I just want, I'm fine. I think this is really important as we start crafting and what our task for the assessment is and where we're really focusing. And I thank the subcommittee for all their hard work and efforts, but
This is what I talked about a little bit the end of the last meeting, of us having buckets, because there's such a wide range from birth to 18. It encompasses, 18 years of life. So I just want to make sure that before I vote on it, that I'm.
If you'd like, I can run through each one. So under school readiness, increase the number of children who enter kindergarten socially, emotionally, and academically ready to succeed. We know that a high percentage of children in Leon County do not enter school prepared to succeed. And if you don't enter school prepared to succeed, you have a high likelihood that you will not succeed. I've talked to first grade teachers who can tell you which students are going to are going to drop out of high school with a very high degree of accuracy, because the children are competing with folks that they aren't in a position to compete with. Increasing school age supports increase school performance and reduce juvenile crime among school age children. A prime area under that may be third grade reading in terms of school performance, learning to read by grade 3, reading to learn after that. And reducing juvenile crime. This addresses out of school and other potentials, obviously, that many other potentials. With regard to children, youth, and families, physical health, reducing infant and maternal mortality, increasing infant health, improving oral health, and improving early identification of health problems. Health problems, of course, are huge with regard to being able to succeed in school and in other areas of life. Mental health, as we all know, mental health is significantly underfunded in almost every area, and very little funding is appropriated to address infant mental health and the mental health of children, particularly as it relates to being resilient and coming back from adverse childhood impacts. Stable and nurturing families and communities, youth development. This really is about providing opportunities for youth to be able to go on to careers, whether it's in college or whether it's otherwise, and trying to provide pathways or identify and provide assistance to them so that as they move out of the school system, they're able to succeed in life. Food stability is an issue. Hunger is an issue. That crosses all planes with regard to all the studies that we've seen. I met with Second Harvest executive director the other day, and the level of food insecurity in Leon County for children is huge. We've got Title I schools where 80–90% of the children are eligible for free and reduced lunches, and that hunger issue again has cross-cutting impacts across many different areas. With regard to housing stability, every day in Florida, there are, or at least snapshot, 60,000 school children who do not have a home to live in. Leon County is part of that. I don't know the numbers for Leon County, but this would address that issue, particularly with children transitioning out of child welfare system who often are just left with not many opportunities. And supporting caregivers may arguably one of the biggest areas of need in the foster care system is it's not shown here, is kinship care and adoptive care and foster care, and providing the supports, particularly for kinship care from the numbers that I've seen, that will allow those caregivers to appropriately nurture the children in their care and help position them for success in life.
Mr. Granger, just because I know that this is not in our packet, you send it to us and with the note that said, because it's so big, print it yourself.
Yes, sir.
So could you read again under the supporting caregivers what the new language says?
Yes, sir.
I have it here. I
You
can
do?
read it for you.
Dr.
Sure. All right. So we are changing, we have supporting and expanding the number of caregivers. And then the content says, enhance caregivers, including kinship, foster and adoptive parents, capability to respond to the emotional and behavioral needs of neglected and abused children and youth. Are you
Thank
good?
you, Dr. Glenn.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. Thank you. And I just wanted to make sure you all understood the process that we went through to identify these. The areas that were highlighted in yellow were the things that we added onto what was recommended by the planning committee. So we adopted 95% of what they recommended, and then we added additional areas that we thought were priority areas that should be addressed.
So I'm sorry,
You are recognized, Superintendent Hannah.
I didn't make it 5 minutes, Commissioner. Already, look, yeah, you definitely need to come to one of our meetings. So this is going to be the instruction that's laid out for whoever conducts the need assessment, but is it so? Seems very broad. But are they going to understand, where to drill down, what programs to, they're looking at or not looking at? I mean, this covers a lot of different areas with a lot of latitude.
Can I comment, Mr. Chair?
Yes, you are recognized.
Absolutely. So these are the priority areas that we want them to address. But the specifics as to what we're looking for, like the type of data we want them to analyze, the specificity of the data, the types of services, the types of programs, all of that is detailed in the ITN. And that's the document we're still working through.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair?
Any other comments? Mr. Mitchell?
Just one comment, and I apologize. Thank you for giving me the printed version. I was looking at it on my screen at my office, and as I was reading through the draft, I realized it's just a draft at this point. I was struck by, and maybe it was just a poor reading comprehension on my part, but it seemed like we were not clear that to whoever's going to do perform this needs assessment, that the for-profit community is every bit as eligible to bid on providing services as the not-for-profit community. And I was reading it really quickly on my iPad screen.
Sure.
So I may have missed it, may have just misunderstood, but I'll try to direct it to Mr. Granger when I see it, but I just want to make sure that it's very clear to whoever is putting together this needs assessment that the 10 of us are not saying this has to be a not-for-profit organization that's providing the services.
Absolutely. And if you want to make that language a little bit stronger, you're definitely welcome. And that's why we are bringing the updated or revised version to the full committee, because we do want you to be able to provide that specific feedback for us. But that is definitely the intent.
That was truly the only thing that stood out without, again, having seen the new language, but this is great.
Okay. So,
sorry. Go, Dr. Glenn.
No, I'm sorry.
Interrupt you.
I just noticed that Ted had his finger up. He wanted to make a comment.
Mr. Chair, may I?
You may.
For the record, I'd point out that Ms. McFadden, that has been a key interest of hers also, to make sure all segments of the community are able to participate in this. On page 8, it's under section D. The definition of provider, which is used throughout the document to identify who funding may be provided to, is defined as a nonprofit, for-profit, governmental, or other organization that delivers services or programs to children, youth, and/or parents.
Excellent. Commissioner Cummings, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I read through this as well, and I want to commend the committee. I think they did a great job, and I think they captured those areas where other entities that have done studies, including this Children's Services Council committee's conclusions, that these were some of the critical areas that we need to focus on. But my overarching concern is I didn't see anything in here, and I'm not sure if it needs to be in here, where we're giving due consideration to services that are already being provided. I know the statute says we cannot, there can be no supplantation. And I think we're all aware that there are millions of dollars coming in under the rescue program proposed by President Biden, specifically directed to Head Start programs. So whoever selected to do the needs assessment, I'm not sure if I saw it in here, and I'm not sure if it needs to be in here, but we as a council need to be conscious of it. If there's some way there could be some recognition that some of these programs have received an enormous amount of funding on the federal level to provide those services where there might be gaps right now, so that we don't become, duplicative in those areas as, with taxpayers' funds. So I think we've got to be careful in that respect.
Dr. Glenn.
I'm trying to say it. I hope you understand what I'm saying.
Yes, Dr. Glenn, go ahead.
So we do address that, and maybe we can add a little bit more specificity to meet your request. And I'm trying to find exactly where it is, but I think if you look on page 30, which is page number 12 in the packet, we're asking the respondent to identify programs and services in Florida and around the country that have documented effectiveness in addressing issues identified in the previous sections, including efforts and initiatives that coordinate service delivery models. I think we tried to address that here, but we can add more language to ensure that there's an inventory of programs and services, and there's no duplication of services. Yes, Ted, is there?
Mr. Granger, you're recognized.
Sorry.
We're getting
Yeah, I know,
there.
I'm sorry.
We're gonna make Commissioner Cummings proud before this is all over. Mr. Granger, you're recognized.
Commissioner Cummings, I think there's a major concern with regard to after 2 years when the federal funding leaves, the gaps that will be created, and the opportunities for creating additional services and opportunities during those 2 years. On the same page, on page 30, that Dr. Glenn pointed out, in the middle of the page, G, ask the respondent how they will determine the amount of federal funds each provider will or is anticipated to receive through those federal funds, how the funding will be used, the projected benefits of the funds on child outcomes, projected positive and negative fiscal impacts on providers, programs, and services that will occur after the funding expires, and how providers, the CSC, and other funders can leverage the positive impacts and mitigate against the negative impacts generated by the one-time funding.
Any other comments, discussions?
Mr. Chair.
Who's that? Oh, Mr. Mitchell, go ahead.
Thank you. Dr. Glenn, I thought you guys did a great job. I would point out that whoever ultimately wins this this procurement, the Speaker of the House, Chris Sprowls, and the governor put forward a pretty significant initiative this year and created, I want to say it's called REACH, Reimagining Education, and I'll be darned if I can remember what CH stands for, but that I hope the vendor will work with the Governor's Office of Policy and Budget, who is coordinating with the Department of Children and Families, the Department of Education, and the Department of Economic Opportunity, essentially things similar to what we're doing, and they're helping find the gaps in service. So it would be worth whoever's while it is that wins this award to reach out to the woman who is the director is Katie Crowfoot. Just for what it's worth, again, to Commissioner Cummings' point of making sure we're not duplicating efforts. It's again, I applaud what Speaker Sprowls has done, and this was a huge push for him, and it dovetails rather nicely with what we're trying to accomplish.
Thanks very much. Other comments, discussion? Commissioner Cummings, you are
Yes.
recognized.
Mr. Chair, in following those comments, I wonder if we couldn't be specific in the request for proposal or request to negotiate, specifically setting forth a requirement or how the responder would best communicate with the governor's office, with the Department of Children and Families. I think it would be good if we just delineate those entities that are doing something similar into the request for proposal or request to negotiate, and allow the respondent to respond and say, we will do this, during this 3-month period of the study. We intend to contact the governor's office X amount of times, the Children and Families X amount of time, get their most recent statistics in this particular area, in that particular area. So I just think we should be specific and include it as part of the direction.
Can I comment, please?
Yes, Dr. Glenn,
Thank
you're
you.
recognized.
No, I completely agree. And I understand exactly what it is that you all are asking for. And I think we can add that level of specificity. My request to the committee members is, as you see these gaps of things that should be included and added, please make sure you put them in writing, and make sure you send them forward to Ted, so we won't violate any laws here. Yeah, but send those directly to Ted, and we definitely do take those under consideration and try to work to insert them. This is a huge undertaking, I got to tell you. And poor Liza, I think she knows this backwards and forwards. She's read through it so many times. But we want that in writing to make sure we're ticking every single one of these requests off. So that's our request. Don't do it today, because a revised version is coming. But we definitely want to make sure we can add that level of specificity to it.
Maybe I could ask Mr. Socks to, one thing we discussed in the committee meeting was the temptation to answer all questions in this document. And Walter speaks from experience.
Yeah.
Mr. Socks, I should.
Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to comment on that. And it's just the 2 bites of the apple philosophy behind an ITN. In the first process, you're using this solicitation document to generate what's known as the best value option vendor to do the needs assessment. In the second part of the process, you're sitting at the negotiation table and negotiating the terms and conditions with the vendor you selected. So a lot of the stuff that's being brought up now about we should ask them to do this, we should make sure they do that, that actually can occur during negotiations. So if it is a determinant of best value, do they have the capacity to do this? That definitely needs to be the ITN. But if we want to then educate the negotiation team, make sure you get this, this, and this, that will be the second bite of the apple that will come after the vendor has been selected. So there's kind of like 2 pots you need to be imagining. What are the best value determinations? Let's get that in the ITN. And then what are the negotiation standards and the contract terms we want to put together? The negotiation team will sit down and actually work out the terms and conditions on the contract.
Excellent,
Hopefully that helps.
excellent. Any other comments, questions, discussions? The board wants to get to, the council wants to get to work. It's a good problem to have. I appreciate y'all very much. Thank you so much.
I do have a question.
Dr. Glenn.
Did we ever approve the priority levels?
Oh, no, we did not.
Yeah.
The motion has been moved and seconded. Is there any objection, or do we need to have a vote? I see no objection. It carries unanimously. Thank you, Dr. Glenn. All right. That brings us to the CEO Search Committee report. Mr. Granger, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excuse me. On page 54 of your packet, the CEO Search Committee materials are included. The CEO Search Committee, which is the executive committee of the council, reviewed these materials and agreed to put them in front of the council for consideration today. On page 54 is the job announcement that will be posted, and we're looking at posting this, if it is approved by the council tomorrow, We'll talk about the timeline in a moment because we are on a fast track for this also. This is a pretty basic announcement that you can read. It does provide that the compensation and packages will be competitive and commensurate with experience and qualifications. I am in the process of working with a couple different groups right now, entities, in putting together an executive compensation package. So we will have that. I will bring that to you for your consideration. Also, because we are a public entity, this person and other staff will be eligible for the Florida retirement system and for Florida health benefits. And I've been in contact with FRS and with People First to begin discussing those items. You can see in the middle, it says insert link. We will be posting or including on the Children's Services Council website the actual job description so that people can go there and who are interested in go there and see what the actual description is. On page 55 begins the actual job description. One of the things that the committee has agreed to is that the title of the position will be, as it is noted already in the bylaws, an executive director as opposed to a CEO. So everywhere where you see in the job description the word CEO will be replaced with executive director. Other than that, I think it's pretty straightforward what is included until you get to page 57, which includes the educational requirements, something the committee was interested in making sure everybody was on board with. This education requirement is part of what the St. Lucie County Children's Services Council has for their job requirements. And they are similar size to Leon County. Master's degree in public administration, business administration, social sciences, or other related areas of specialization, minimum of 8 years experience, or a bachelor's degree with 10 or more years of experience in social services.
Very good. Is there a motion? I'm sorry about that.
Lastly, well, yeah, I would just like to point out.
Premature motion call. Go ahead, Mr. Granger.
I'm sorry.
You may proceed. I apologize.
If you go forward to page 59, you'll see the timeline and all the activities that we will undertake and the committee will undertake and the council will undertake in hiring the CEO, and the anticipated and hopeful for start date is November 1st.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Jones, you're recognized.
When I read this, I thought it was great. The only thing I thought that might be missing, and I don't know if this is where we do this or we just put it in writing, of the qualifications of the master's degree, I did not see education referenced. There's an opportunity for an educator, particularly a person with expertise in educational leadership, to also provide guidance for this group as well. And I just think that might be one of the areas of specialty that would be considered, as well as public administration and business management and others likewise. I would just like that to be considered as a Scrivener change.
Or comparable, something like that.
Yeah, because it says comparable, but I just think that education is also would be a noted area of specialty.
Educational leadership.
Not just other or at all or something like that, but education specific.
Ms. McFadden?
As a follow-up, I was also looking at the bachelor's degree or 10 more of experience in social services. And I guess I've been pretty clear, I don't necessarily think the person needs a background in social services. It could be government, it could be business, it could be an entrepreneur. I think it's quality of that individual and what their experience has been, which might be very multifaceted.
Right.
I mean, people do not stay in one area anymore for 10 years. I think that's kind of going backwards, not forward. So I think a bachelor's degree with 10 or more years of experience, period, or professional experience. Or professional experience. would be adequate?
Particularly leadership experience and management experience are words that I think we would look for in a person at that level. Social services doesn't necessarily describe human services and other areas of specialty that could certainly drive, but provide the type of quality that we would want to describe. I agree.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Jones. Mr. O'Brien, you're recognized.
Just the term applicable experience, I think is, I mean, I don't mind putting in certain backgrounds, but it's only as a guideline. I don't think it needs to be hard and fast. I think what we're really looking for is someone who has applicable experience and who can lead and guide us through that. I mean, they could have a degree in zoology for all I care, as long as they carry the experience and can bring that success to us. But my comment is on the timeline. This may go without saying, but it's a proposed timeline. My belief is if we evaluate candidates and don't have candidates that are truly qualified or who we feel are the best candidates to move forward, I don't think we should be held to this timeline. I think it's more important for us to get the right individual, take the time to get that individual, than be forced into a deadline of a start date of November 1. Hopefully with the recognition that Mr. Granger would be willing to stick around until we could find an appropriate replacement for him. I'm not in a rush to replace Mr. Granger. Certainly wanting us to get the right person in there, but I don't want us to put timing as a priority. I think we should have quality candidates and quality executive director as our priority.
Fair enough.
Mr.
So
Chair.
any other discussion?
Mr.
Mr.
Chair.
Mitchell, you are recognized. Mr. Sutton, well, one or the other. Mr. Mitchell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with Ms. McFadden. I think you can accomplish it, Ted, by the bachelor's degree with 10 or more years of relevant experience, period. I'll kind of point to Mr. O'Brien and say, hey, doctors make great providers of medical care. They don't always make great businessmen and women. I don't think that 10 years of social services experience is going to make necessarily a great executive director with the qualifications that we've listed above. So the relevant experience is the relevant experience in the qualifications and the leadership abilities. And I think you accomplish it by doing that.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Mr. Socks, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. I had a couple of comments that are just wordsmithing, and then one that's a little bit substantive. In the overview of the position paragraph, we use the term be performance orientated. I would prefer the word oriented. Orientated sounds just a little bit directional to me, like orientated east or orientated north, but performance oriented seems to be a little bit better English.
I think it's proper.
And I think that word reappears in the description on item G. So if you could fix that as well. It also, there's two parts of this document that refer to the governing council of the CSCLC. You mentioned earlier the executive committee, I think is the term used in the bylaws. I don't think we use the term governing council. I may be wrong, but I just ask you to look at that and see if that term could be cleaned up a little bit. And then specifically related to the skills, experience, qualifications, what I didn't see in the A through H list is strategic planning, analytical skills, and financial management background. And I think those are three critically important areas that I would like to see experience in this executive director. So I'd ask that those be considered to be added within the A through H list, maybe not added as I, J, and K, but somewhere fit them in. Strategic planning, analytical skills, and financial management experience. That was it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Socks. Any other comments?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Cummings, you're recognized.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I just wasn't clear under the educational requirements. the suggestion, it says a bachelor's degree with 10 or more years of, and I think there was going to be a change, but I'm not sure what the change was.
Mr. Mitchell had suggested relevant experience. And it really up to the
Relevant.
candidate to make their pitch as to why their experience is relevant, I would guess.
And
Okay, I don't, I'm not sure if that's clear and directive to, or fair to the candidate. We're saying relevant experience to children, Children's Services Council, to be an executive director. You know, I think it's too broad. I think I think it leaves room for being subjective rather than objective. So I think if we want to qualify that, I think we need to be specific about it and not just say relevant experience. Who makes that determination of whether or not my experience is relevant as an executive, you know, an executive director? I just think it's too broad. I think it's open to so many different interpretations.
Thank you, Commissioner Cummings. Mr. Mitchell, you're recognized.
thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with Commissioner Cummings. Sorry, I was kind of throwing it out there, the relevant experience as it relates to the professional experience and qualifications that's listed above. So you can wordsmith it, Ted, but it's essentially relevant to what we're asking for that would include the 3 additional items that Mr. Sachs also listed. So relevant to what we're seeking in terms of job experience and qualifications.
Is it, Commissioner Cummings, might I make a suggestion? Or do you wish to be recognized? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just think it needs to be specific. It can say 10 or more years of experience in being a manager, executive, working with children. I think we need to be specific. If we are going to say relevant experience, I need to know. I might apply. I might resign and apply, but I need to know what relevant, you know, I've run a law firm for 30 years. Is that relevant? You see? And Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Commissioner Cummings.
my other question is, and I believe Mr. Granger said he wants to go on and advertise this, I believe. And I'm concerned with the first page where it says compensation. The salary and executive benefit is competitive and commensurate with experience and qualification. Well, if I don't know the salary range, I might not apply. I think it's important that we have a salary range, or maybe that's not the norm. Maybe we need to discuss a salary range for this particular position, but I just think if we want to get highly qualified people, I think they need to know what the salary range is, commensurate with the experience and qualifications, and give that range, recognizing if you don't have all of that experience, but some of it, and you might be a good executive director, then you might not go all the way to the top of the range. You might be mid-range or 3/4 of the way, but I just believe if we're going to attract good people, we should have a salary in there, a salary range at least. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Cummings. Mr. Mitchell, or Mr. Sachs, who wish to be recognized.
I just wanted to maybe add something to the minimum educational requirements discussion. As many of you know, I have the luxury of also sitting on the Escambia Children's Trust, and they are too working on their job description for their executive director. And in that particular section, they use the following: a bachelor's degree from an accredited college or university, degree in public administration, management, human or social services area preferred, with a minimum of 5 years of professional experience in management/leadership, community planning, program development, agency budgeting, or related activities.
Love it.
So it sort of is comprehensive. It doesn't introduce the master's degree, but it does speak to the preference of certain types of education under a bachelor's degree with 5 years of experience. Now, this is a draft. It certainly could change because I have yet to give feedback on it. But I wanted to provide that because I think it deals with some of the comprehensiveness of what you're looking for, some specificity that, Ted, I think you could get that from Carolyn with no problem.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Jones, you are recognized.
I think his point is well made. I think his description is spot on in terms of what we would want, and we would make that same translation at the master's level. And I think we shouldn't diminish the years of experience. I think they should be equal to or greater. I think your point about the salary range is also well put. We cannot take for granted that the public is aware, although this information may be publicly noticed, that the public is aware of what our financial stake is, and what our financial options are. And I think to communicate that will help us to make sure that we invite the type of interest that this position deserves. I also want to remind, and I think I don't know if I mentioned this in our committee, Dr. Glenn, or if I mentioned it to the full dais, you'll notice that these timelines that come to us, our needs assessment will end later than the time on which the executive director is brought on. And I'm just concerned about the continuity of leadership for a project manager on a project of this sort to ensure that the will of this committee is ultimately met when we will have already started this process after the director is hired, before the director is hired. And I just want us to make certain that we reserve options to remain engaged with Mr. Granger to ensure that we are able to have the type of product ultimately on the needs assessment that we want, although we will have perhaps started with new leadership. Also, I think Mr. Bryant's point about the timing, I think we will have the type of flexibility if we don't have the type of candidate that we want to, again, be able to continue to negotiate with Mr. Granger to ensure that we have that flexibility, the type of time that we need in case we come back with a talent pool that is not, and that happens frequently. The superintendent, I'm sure, will tell you, you can put out a position vacancy announcement and you don't get what you're looking for, and you have to start all over again. And us embracing that flexibility, I think, is also critical for us as well.
Dr. Glenn, you're recognized.
I just want to comment, as I completely agree with Mr. Jones. As I was reviewing the timeline as we were going through the needs assessment, I did have a mini heart attack when it dawned on me that Mr. Granger would not be available throughout that entire process. I did, my blood pressure went up. So I do think that this is something that we should consider. I know we gave him a timeline, and those were our decisions. But just to make sure the process is complete and finalized, and we dot the i's and cross the t's before we transition into the completion of the needs assessment and the beginning of the work, I think we need to consider making sure we have steady leadership throughout the entire process.
Fair enough. Mr. Mitchell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In terms of the salary compensation package for the executive director, Commissioner, I too agree with your point. If we refer back to the budget, I realize that was a painful experience, but I would encourage you to go back to the budget because the budget is your guiding document. And two things I'll point out. One, we mentioned that Mr. Granger may stay past his contract date of November 30th. That would be the 6-month period. However, we budgeted for an executive director, I believe, Ted, at $125,000 a year. That's the budget. Doesn't mean we have to stick to it, but at least that would give you an idea. And I happen to agree that we need to put something in the advertisement so that somebody who's making $200,000 a year is probably not going to apply, but somebody making $80,000 a year might be interested. The second thing I'll point out is that we had a document that has all of the salaries that are currently being paid to executive directors of Children's Services Council. And if we just took the low and the high and said, that's our range and your salary will be, based on years of experience and blah, blah, blah. That would, I think, Commissioner, get you what you wanted and give you, Mr. Granger, an opportunity to get the job advertisement out quickly.
Chair.
Mr. Jones, you're recognized.
I think your point is well made, Mr. Mitchell. However, I think the budget, as you first described, is our guide, not what other CSCs are doing. We've set our ceiling at 125. And an example that you use, say for example, an executive that we would hire. I think we as stewards of these public dollars, if we hire an executive director who at present may be making 80, we may be able to bring that person in at less than our max. And we need to have that flexibility as well. And so I think if there's a range of say $40,000 in there from say 80 to 125 or 90 to 125, but it gives us opportunity to then be able to use our discretion to what it would take to bring someone to come to us, and it might not be our max.
Fair enough. Mr. Mitchell.
And Mr. Jones, to that point, the range around the state is pretty significant. I think the lowest one is somewhere in the 85 to 90 range, and the highest might be 140 or 160 in one of the larger counties, Dade County and Broward. Okay. And if you remember, I made 2 points about the budget. One, the first year is going to be awkward because we have nothing to base it on. But we have built in a contingency, a reserve for if, and that's why I said, if we go ahead and put a range out there, if it's the will of this body to cap it at 125, okay. I think that's a pretty good salary. But if we have a home run hitter and they're looking for 130, I wouldn't want to limit this body's abilities. So if maybe we come up with a range today and we give that to Mr. Granger. Do you have I was looking through, I know I have it if I look, what like Alachua County makes and what Escambia is proposing, what Hillsborough makes. I mean, those are bigger counties, but Alachua and Escambia are comparable.
Well, then if you, on that same note, then you put comma negotiable. Put your range and then you put comma negotiable.
Mr. Granger, you are recognized, sir.
I believe the range, the upper end of the range that's in the budget that y'all looked at when you were approving the budget was 125. I believe the lower end was about 110, give or take. Again, those were based on the salaries of CEOs in similarly sized areas. I wonder if given what Mr. Mitchell has said, if we say the salary range or commensurate with experience, to address the issue of someone applying who currently makes more.
Well, I mean, Mr. Chair.
Please, Mr. Mitchell.
It may be the will of everybody to cap it at 125. We just put that number in there as a placeholder, recognizing, I can't remember which member of the council it was, but they made the point that you could move funds amongst, between categories. So that's part of our budget process. So if we end up hiring somebody at $130,000 a year, Mr. Jones, we would have that flexibility to do so.
Mr. O'Brien.
Thank you, Judge. To the point of moving this along, if we want to give a reasonable range, I think 110 to 125 is too narrow of a range based upon experience. If we want to say 190, not 190, sorry, 90 to 130 or 95 to 135 or something like that, or 9, we just need to put a range, but you typically have a range that gives you some experience, some breadth.
Very good.
But, well, almost, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Commissioner Cummings.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm looking at the budget that we passed, the approved budget, and we indicated total for the executive director, $135,420, which included benefits. 30,
Well,
anyway,
if that's the
135.
case, if
You're recognized.
thank you, Mr. Chair. We base those. I don't know what you're, when Ted and I did the budget, it was based on $125,000.
Right.
And then benefits on top of that. So I don't, the 125,432 sounds sort of exact, like we added something into it. And I don't know what that is.
Commissioner Cummings, go ahead.
Yes, Your Honor, for clarification, it says CEO salary 125 plus benefits of 37,500. It says at 30%, and then it says total 135,420. And I.
Those numbers do not add up.
Those and as the budget chair, pardon me, Mr.
Sorry,
Chair, as the budget chair, I don't think I would have added that.
I don't think you would.
That's why I was confused. Again, we can go lower than 125 and we can go higher than 125 if that's the will. We have.
Let me.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Jones, go
the
ahead.
superintendent of Leon County Schools makes $120,000. I can't imagine us paying a person to run the CSC at a salary greater than $125,000 to manage to manage the responsibilities that we expect of them. And I think in a community of where the cost of living is far different than some of our sister cities and sister CSCs, I think $125,000 is a good salary in Leon County.
Fair enough. So I am. So does anyone else need to speak? All right. So let me just ask Mr. Granger, maybe this is a question for Mr. Rowe, I don't know. Can we just give you policy level guidance that we want you to propose a range within budget? And we want and we want you to propose a description that's consistent with the comments of the council today. Do we need much more than that?
No, sir. Point of clarification, if I incorporate that based upon the discussion today, would that be approved by the council conceptually so that we could go ahead and post? Or would you want to wait and see the range?
That's my, well, I think we're pretty clearly within somewhere in the vicinity of 100, cap of 125 to
Not to exceed. That's our cap.
Range.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, I think that's yes. So the answer is yes. You can post. All right. Mr. Sox, anything else to say about anything else?
But one more question, sir.
Mr. Jones.
Are we adopting the language that Mr. Sox recommended for us?
Is that the motion?
I'm willing to make that motion. I thought it was ideally described.
There is a motion. Is there a second? There's a motion and a second. Now read the language again, Walter, if you would.
The language that Ted will be getting from Carolyn at the Escambia Children's Trust is bachelor's degree from an accredited college or university, degree in public administration, management, human or social services area preferred, with a minimum of 5 years of professional experience in management/leadership, community planning, program development, agency budget, or related activities.
All right, good
Did
enough.
not include education, so if that degree could be added, that would address Mr. Jones' other concern, and I think it would be comprehensive.
That was going to be my friendly amendment. Yes, sir.
Education.
And
Mr. Mitchell.
yeah, and one final thing, as long as we've got a motion and a second on the floor. If Mr. Jones, you would also consider Mr. Sox's, because this will be part of the job announcement, the financial management, the other three things that would be part of. So we would, yeah, so I got a thumbs up. So that's a friendly amendment. And I can't remember, it was financial management, Mr. Sachs, the other two items.
Analytical skills.
Analytical skills and strategic planning.
Strategic
experience. Yeah, I think Ted picked those up as Rivener options, not really as big modifications.
All right, so we've got a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Objections? Motion passes unanimously. Mr. Granger, is that adequate for you?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Excellent. So we've got $125,000 salary cap, the job description and the process has been approved. So I can- Brings us to next item on the agenda, next and future council meetings. So we've got one trim public hearing date set, truth in millage rate, public hearing date set for September 8th at 5:15. And we have to select a second public hearing date. And Mr. Granger, you're going to have to forgive me, which is I left my piece of paper sitting on my desk up in the office, but there's what it boils down to is the best we can do is dates where at least two council members are going to be absent. And Ted, remind me of the date that you were.
September 20th and September 21st were the two dates.
So September 20th and September 21st. And my memory of the chart that you gave me, maybe I have it here. My memory of the chart that you gave me is that Mr. Sachs and Ms. Cummings were unavailable at 1, and Mr. O'Brien, I can't remember who else was.
Mr. Mitchell and Mr. Jones.
Mr. Mitchell and Mr. Jones not available the other. So that's the situation that we're in.
On the 21st, I confirmed, I spoke with both Mr. Mitchell and Mr. Jones today, and Mr. Jones saw that his calendar was indeed clear on the 21st, and Mr. Mitchell's going to play it by ear. And so that's the date when most people.
Excellent. So we're looking like the September 21st at 5:15 would be the most appropriate date for our second trim public hearing.
Yes, sir.
September 21st at 5:15 would be the second trim public hearing. I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion or objection? So September 21st at 5:15 will be our second trim public hearing. Bringing us to our next scheduled council meeting. I am going to cancel the August 5th date. And the reason I'm canceling the August 5th date is because we're going to work on the needs assessment committee. So the needs assessment committee is still going to meet, but the council's not. The work of the needs assessment committee is going to make up a large part of the agenda of our August 19th meeting. So that means our next meeting will be August 19th. What time is our next meeting?
2 o'clock to 5.
August 19th at 2 p.m. August 19th at 2 p.m. And that brings us to future meetings. I think we're going to propose future meetings for the third Thursday of each month after that, or as soon as we can get to where we're not meeting constantly, it seems like. All future meetings are going to be at the Tallahassee Community College campus off of Appleyard Drive, except for our October 21 meeting. I'm not exactly certain about that. That meeting is going to be here. October 21 is going to be in the commission chambers, I'm guessing, because the Appleyard, the TCC campus is not going to be available for some reason. So yes, so for committee meetings, the idea is that when we do committee meetings that are back to back with a meeting of the whole council. The meeting will be wherever the council's meeting. The committee meeting will be wherever the council is meeting. So by and large, it'll be at the TCC campus. If the committee is meeting as a standalone committee without a council meeting to follow, it'll be here in the commission chambers. And we'll do a public notice, and hopefully we'll avoid as much confusion as possible. So if you look at page 64 and 65 of your meeting packet, this is our meeting schedule. As you can tell from our discussion, this has starting to seem like a lot of work to me. We've worked hard. I am proud of this council. I'm proud of the work that I've done, and I'm proud of the work of these council members. The fact that we stood this up. This has been one of the scariest things I've ever done, and I've done some scary things. We're going to be busier between August and October than we've been so far, because we've got to do all these things. We've got to get an ITN on the street. We've got to make progress hiring Ted's replacement. We've got to get through the trim process. We've got to start all of the things to actually carry out the mission of the council while we're still in the process really of creating the council. And so I just want everybody, y'all rolled up your sleeves. I'm so proud of everybody, but we have got to keep the nose to the grindstone. So Ted, was that what you were hoping I would say? That part of Ted's operating me like a puppet here, but was that what we were trying to get across?
Yes, sir. I would just point out that from pages 61 to 63, when you see the meetings that the chair just reviewed, 61 to 63 are all the things that are going to be done during that time period, so you can see what the purpose of the meetings actually is. And I would reiterate what the judge said. Potentially, August, September, and October of this year could be the busiest months the council may ever have, given the things that you'll be going through.
Thank you very, very much. All right. Next meeting agenda. Next meeting agenda, we're going to take up the recommendation of the Needs Assessment Committee. Are we going to be hearing from Ms. Gleason at the next meeting, do we think?
Yes, sir.
The presentation on open meetings, public records, sunshine presentation by Attorney Pat Gleason. Ted, do we need a specific agenda item related? So we're going to be voting to put the invitation to negotiate on the street, right? Vote on ITN. That's for the needs assessment. Are we going to be doing anything with the CEO search at the next meeting?
We'll provide an update, yes, sir.
Update on CEO search. So I'd also like, I don't know if it's this meeting or the following meeting, maybe Ted, if you could provide us a report on how we conduct the public hearing, if there's any technical requirements. Mr. Riddle, I don't know if this is something you could help us with too. If there's any technical requirements, how that public hearing has to be conducted, if there's any boxes that we have to check off in addition to just hearing from the public. But I'd appreciate a suggestion on that.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Jones, please.
Did we finalize the purchasing policy? Will that not come back to us at the next meeting?
Yes. Procurement policy. Are we, Mr. Rowe, are we planning to vote? Ted, are we planning to vote? Mr. Granger, are we planning to vote on the procurement policy at the next meeting?
Yes, Mr.
And Mr. Chair, I will be distributing that to council members for your review within the next week or two.
Excellent. And we're supposed to individually, not by copying everyone, individually providing our comments on the procurement policy.
Yes, sir.
Anything else that we need on the agenda?
Just
Mr. Socks.
checking on that particular issue. I think the general counsel recommended that we do a resolution for that operating procedure. Is that the normal process for a board to introduce a procedure through a resolution?
Yeah, well, it depends on the board itself. Many cities and counties do it by ordinance. This being a special district, you don't have ordinance powers, so a resolution.
So we would be voting on a resolution that adopts the procedures.
The procedures would essentially be attached as a exhibit to the discussion.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Socks. Commissioner Cummings, you wish to be recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is not about the agenda, so I'll wait, Your Honor. I apologize.
All right. That's starting to seem like a fairly full agenda. Anything else? Any other comments, discussions of the agenda? Mr. Rowe, were you trying to get my attention? All right, excellent. So that will be our agenda for the next meeting. That brings us to, I believe, member comments. Commissioner Cummings, do you wish to be recognized?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to verify that we do have the trim hearing on September the 8th at 5:15. It's on my calendar. I know we verified the September 21st at 5:15.
Yes.
But it's
The
September 8th.
First
first one.
public hearing is September 8th at 5:15.
Thank you. Thank you.
Excellent. Anything else? Member comments, Mr. Mitchell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So somebody who clearly doesn't have any thing to do today must have been listening in and has let me know that REACH, the program that was created by the legislature and just signed into law by the governor, is reimagining education and career help. So that's what the CH that I struggled with is.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Excellent. Mr. Socks.
Thank you, Chair. 3 items. A reminder, requested anyone that wants to from the CSC to be on our Circuit 2 Alliance. We would still love to have a member. I've yet to have anyone raise their hand, so please see me if you're interested. Actually, see Ted, and Ted will tell you the specifics on how to join our alliance. Second item, and probably to be covered by Pat in our next meeting, July 1 was the financial filing deadline, but you actually have till September 30th till fees kick in. So if you haven't filed your financial disclosures with the Commission on Ethics, just remember that that is a absolute requirement of a CSC member. And I would like to take the opportunity to introduce Terrence Watts. Terrence is in our audience. Terrence, if you'll come up to the podium quickly. Terrence has just been promoted to be the circuit administrator here in Circuit 2. He comes from our Child Welfare Division as a program administrator. And as many of you know, this seat is the only seat that is allowed to be delegated. And at some future meeting, I think it's going to be the September meeting now, Terrence will be delegated the authority to sit in this seat. I'll prepare a document that supports that, so you'll have that. Terrence, if you wouldn't mind just telling folks a little bit about yourself and your background in Leon County.
Sure. So my name is Terrence Watts, and I've been with the Department of Children and Families since 2003. I moved to Tallahassee about 5 years ago to take my previous position as the administrator. Very passionate about children. Can see myself working for any other agency, and definitely excited about this new opportunity as the development administrator.
Thanks, Terrence. Thank you, Jess.
Thank you very much. Well, Walter, I'm not, we're gonna miss you, but Terrence wears a tie. So, Mr. Watts,
That's why I promoted him.
thank you so much and welcome aboard. We'll look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Any other member comments? Mr. Mitchell?
Yeah, one more thing, Mr. Chair. I'm glad Mr. Socks mentioned the financial reporting. Ted, two things. Could one, I believe mine is submitted. I mean, I submitted it. Will you verify for all 10 of us whether or not ours are in? And then secondly, and this might help, it will definitely help me and get to Commissioner Cummings' point. Perhaps we could have an email to each one of us with the scheduled meetings that we have now based on the chair's removal of August, whatever it was, the 5th that got moved to the night, or that's, if we could just have a new one because, because my calendar looks more full than it actually is.
Mr. Granger, can you do that?
We were thinking, and if the council approves this, we can get it to you in paper form like this, but we were thinking about sending calendar invites to everyone for every meeting. So that we'll know exactly who's going to be coming, who is not unable to, and it'll be automatically easy for you to put onto your calendar.
All right. Make sure mine go to Ms. Goss. Ms. Goss. Ms. Goss has got to get, I am not allowed to, Ted, you got to send mine to Ms. Goss, to Ms. Lorraine.
Oh, yes.
The calendar. Invite.
But you're
I'm not allowed to touch my calendar.
Yes, sir.
All right. Anything else? Other comments?
But just so I'm clear, so you're going to check on the 10 of us to make sure that thank you.
I just wanted to add on the calendar invites, it's just way easier if the materials are attached inside the invite so that we, right before we go to the meeting, we have the materials with us. You can put them inside the invite.
So at this point, we would be able to put the meeting notices, but we wouldn't have the agenda items or.
No, you can add them. You send them out and you say, here's this meeting, we accept it. And then whenever the materials are ready, you upload them into our calendar so that we know they're there beforehand. That'd be super helpful.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Thank you for that suggestion. Anything else from anyone else? We are adjourned. Thank you.
So we have you what? Board meeting? Yeah, because we canceled it. Oh, yeah. I've never been to the sounds painful just from the briefing.
We'll survive.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you. See you later. There's a couple different versions. Okay. So online, make
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Stop it.